So this is the story of Smuggler's Leap. Behind me are the two sisters of Reculver, the ruined parish church of Reculver on the northeast coast of Kent. An abandoned village, an abandoned church left to ruin, but a church that is the perfect place to have a lookout and to provide a marker on the landscape for smuggling luggers. A lugger, a ship preferred by the smugglers, and this night the lugger was making its way towards the Kent coast. And as it made its way towards the Kent coast, it saw from Reculver Towers, overlooking the beach, overlooking the sea going northwards, it saw a flare. And it replied with a blue flare. And when those on the beach saw the blue flare from the sea, they knew their work had started. And the smuggler they called Bill. Now, the smuggler they called Bill was very noticeable. We are talking about events that happened over 200 years ago, and he was 6 foot tall in his stockinged feet. The smuggler known as Bill was broad. He was handsome. Oh, there was not a farmer's wife, and may I suggest maybe a farmer or two, whose head had not been turned by the smuggler called Bill, and were relying on him and his friends to provide all those necessaries that could be cheaply gained from a smuggler, or at least more cheaply than from more regular sources. So that would mean brandy, of course, and rum, and lace for the ladies' clothing, and possibly, if you were rich, then you might want a piece of jewelry, maybe a watch brought in, because that had quite heavy taxes on it. But the most valuable of all of the contraband that would come ashore would, of course, be tea. Because tea had the highest taxes on it. It was light to transport. It was easy to hide. So tea was the perfect thing that you could smuggle into England and in via Reculver Towers. And Smuggler Bill gave all his instructions to all his men to prepare themselves. And first of all, of course, he reminded the spotters to look down the roads to make sure that there was no sign of the Customs House officers, and particularly of Exciseman Gill. Because Exciseman Gill was driven to stop smuggling as much as he could, to catch every smuggler that he could, to punish every smuggler. And Exciseman Gill's mission was to catch the smuggler known as Bill. A galley was lowered from the lugger and rowed up onto the shore. It came up on the shore, and with it a rope. The smuggler called Bill's men, grabbed hold of the rope and pulled in the rope. And as they pulled it in, of course, they started to bring in the goods from the ship, the contraband onto the shore. And as they were bringing the contraband onto the shore, and other of Bill's men were picking up barrels and bags and packages and carrying them further up the beach, one of the spotters shouted, "Herne Road! It's Gill!" The smuggler called Bill turned in his saddle and looked up the road towards the village of Herne, and he could hear horses' hooves on the road. "Quickly," he ordered, but not quickly enough. For round the corner came the Customs House officers, riding out onto the beach with their weapons raised, ready to take in the smugglers. And as they came, leading them was Exciseman Gill, shouting at the top of his voice, "Where is Bill? I want Bill. I want to take him." Exciseman Gill looked along the beach. The moon was high, so there was light, and he could see smugglers running, jumping onto horses and riding off with packages held tight, barrels tied to their horses as quickly as they could, followed by customs officers. But then he saw someone sitting high in the saddle of a dapple grey horse, someone who had to be 6 foot in his stockinged feet, someone broad-shouldered. And Gil shouted, "Bill, you're mine!" And he turned his horse to follow Bill. But Bill, oh, he was famous as a smuggler, but his mount was also famous. The dapple grey stallion that he rode was known to run like the wind, and off it rode towards Manston, with exciseman Gil on its tail. And as they went down the lanes, turning sharply this way and that way, jumping through gaps in hedges, exciseman Gil always behind the dapple grey stallion of the smuggler called Bill. And exciseman Gil shouted at the top of his voice, "I would give my soul for a nag that would catch this man. I would give my soul for a nag that would catch this dapple grey stallion, and I don't care if the nag was dappled or grey or brown." And then a voice out of the air called, "Done." Now, those of you who know your animals and your farm animals know that done is a word that means an animal whose fur is faded. So it starts in one color and then it becomes faded and then it goes back to the deeper color again. So a dun horse would have like a faded coat. And exciseman Gil had said, "I would have any horse, whether it was grey or dapple, whether it was brown." And then he heard the voice, "Done." And he said, "Yes, and done. I would have a dun horse." And as he rode, still behind the smuggler known as Bill, ahead on his grey dapple stallion, a horse came riding up alongside him. And riding that horse was a customs house officer he didn't recognize. And exciseman Gil, still following the smuggler known as Bill, one eye on Bill's horse, the other eye on this strange customs house officer, and looked at his horse and said, "Why, the devil take me, I would have that horse." And as he said those words, "The devil take me, I would have that horse," his own horse stumbled and he found himself being pitched over its head and landing on the ground. Luckily, he was only bruised in his ego. Physically, he was fine, and he sat up and cursed and looked up to see that the strange revenue officer was looking down at him, and he said, "Do you truly want my horse?" And exciseman Gil said, "I will have that horse. I would give my soul for that horse." And so the strange customs house officer dismounted and said, "Mount, it's yours." And the horse under exciseman Gil took off as if it had wings. It flew along the ground. It didn't make for gaps in hedges. It just jumped hedges. The smuggler, known as Bill, thought that he had lost exciseman Gil, and he had heard exciseman Gil fall as the horse tripped. But now when he looked behind him, he could see a horse getting closer, and on it was exciseman Gil. But the horse, as it rode towards him, seemed to have eyes of fire. Smoke seemed to come from its nostrils as it panted heavily, and from its hooves sparks flew. Exciseman Gil raised his pistol and fired, and a hole went straight through the barrel of rum that was on the saddle next to smuggler Bill. He swerved his horse and swerved back again, but he couldn't avoid the speed of the horse that was following him, the horse that exciseman Gil was riding. And exciseman Gil found himself riding alongside the smuggler Bill, and he reached out and grabbed the smuggler Bill's collar and held onto the collar and said, "Now I have you." And as he held on to the smuggler Bill, they found themselves cold as they rode into thick fog, a bank of fog that you might call a ha, that can be a vertical wall of fog that appears near the sea where there's a huge temperature difference. But they kept riding through this fog with Exciseman Gill hardly now able to see the smuggler Bill holding onto his collar. I have you, I have you. He could hardly see smuggler called Bill. Bill could hardly see Exciseman Gill. And even by the light of the fire in the horse's eyes, the horse that Exciseman Gill was riding, even in that light, neither of them saw the sheer drop in front of them into a chalk quarry. The next day, 2 bodies were found twisted at the bottom of the quarry. 2 human bodies and the body of 1 horse. And it is said that if you go to that chalk quarry and you dare to go there at night when the moon is high and fog can be seen rolling in, then you too may see Exciseman Gill riding a horse with eyes of fire, panting smoke from its nostrils and galloping with sparks from its hooves, as the revenue officer chases smugglers forever. And on one of my visits to Kent to prepare for these stories, I looked on the maps to see if I could find Smuggler's Leap. And there was a pub called Smuggler's Leap, and there was a holiday caravan park called Smuggler's Leap. So we thought we'd try the holiday caravan park first, and we saw signs to caravan park, Smuggler's Leap, turned into the car park to find ourselves on the edge of a chalk quarry, in the bottom of which were all the caravans where people holiday, probably not knowing that if they holiday on a night of a full moon, and when the fog rolls in, their evenings may be disturbed.